Nice. Well, welcome to our webinar today on social emotional learning and mental health, flipping the script on student supports. We are really excited to have this, to be presenting this webinar for you today. We know that this is something that all of you are thinking about right now. You know, there isn't an educator out there anywhere in the world that is not thinking about the mental health of your students. And so we're hoping today we're going to be able to give you some really great practical information and strategies that you can use in your schools working with your kids. So my name's Amy Walker, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Committee for Children. And with us today as our main presenter is Keeth Matheny. And Keith is gonna step in and say hello shortly. But before we begin, I just wanted to acknowledge that we in Seattle, which is where I'm broadcasting from, we are on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, and Committee for Children's offices specifically sit on the land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish tribe. As we honor the Duwamish people and their ancestors, it is important that we consider our place in the past, present, and future history of the indigenous people of our region, as well as how we can best support them. And I'm sure that wherever you are located, you can do the same for the first people of the land that you are on. So like I said, Keeth Matheny is going to be our presenter today, and he is a national award-winning author, speaker. He was the 2015 winner of the Crystal Star Award for Excellence in Supporting Student Success from the National Dropout Prevention Center. He is the founder of SEL Launchpad, an organization which has helped launch and support over 300 SEL programs in districts across the country. In addition, he is a member of the Aspen Institute Social, Emotional, and Academic Council of Distinguished Educators. Keith is a passionate speaker and dedicated former classroom teacher with over 25 years of experience at both the high school and college levels. And as a high school teacher, he created and taught an innovative high school social and emotional learning freshman seminar course, which had a major positive impact for students and was featured in The Atlantic. Keith is co-author of School Connect, a research and evidence-based social emotional learning curriculum now used in over 2,000 secondary schools. He is a frequent keynote on social emotional learning, emotional intelligence, and multi-tiered systems of student supports. Keith has spoken at countless conferences, has led over 300 teacher trainings, and has presented at 2 congressional briefings on social emotional learning in Washington, D.C. So we are thrilled to have him here today. And also joining with us is our colleague at Committee for Children, Kira Rhodes, and I'm going to let her pop in for just a minute and share with you a little bit about her role in our presentation today.
Oh, you're so kind, Amy. Thank you. So I work on our education partnerships team, and I work promoting social emotional learning in the greater Gulf Coast area, including Texas. And I work closely with our district partners, supporting their second step needs and implementations. And I will be here in chat today to answer your questions throughout the presentation. So feel free to let me know what's on your mind, and we'll continue the conversation over on the side.
So, Committee for Children, obviously you have some familiarity with us, or you wouldn't be joining us today, I'm sure, but we are very excited to welcome you. We are a nonprofit organization. Like I said, we are based in Seattle, Washington. Our mission is to foster the safety and well-being of children through social emotional learning and development. We estimate our programs are reaching 16.5 million children in all 50 states and also in many countries around the world. We are very committed to advocacy, and Committee for Children advocates at both the state and federal levels for policies and laws that support social emotional learning in schools, prevent bullying, and protect children. So our programs, many of you probably know us from Second Step, and that's the program that's used in thousands and thousands of schools around the country. And we offer a holistic approach to building supportive communities for every child through social emotional learning. And our Second Step family of programs supports the whole child by building social emotional competence, addressing bullying, helping protect children in school, with resources that also extend to support adult educators and extend beyond the classroom. We're not going to be talking at all about Second Step today, anymore beyond this, but we do have a lot of webinars and a lot of great information on our website. So if you're interested in knowing more about the work that we do in social emotional learning and how that can help you in your school, please visit our website and perhaps join us for a webinar on one of those topics. So now, without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our headline presenter today, and that is Keeth Matheny. You want to say hello, Keith?
Yeah, great. Well, I'm super excited to be here, and I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank, obviously, Committee for Children for this platform, and I think this is a really important time to have this conversation. In my class, I've always started with some kind of mindful moment or some kind of de-escalation strategy or breathing activity to start. And I think it's an important practice, and I'd like to do that with you guys today. So the one I'd like to do with you is called Grateful Breath. And I'm going to ask you to really quickly jot down 3 things that you're really grateful for in your life. Just take a moment and make a little note of 3 things that you're grateful for in your life. And we're going to use that here in a second. And as I do this activity, I'm going to use something called a Huberman sphere, Hoberman sphere. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, with each breath, I want you to think about something that you're grateful for. And as the sphere expands, I want you to inhale through your nose. And as the sphere contracts, I want you to exhale through your mouth. So get ready. I'll give you another second to get those 3 things you're really grateful for in mind. I see Amy writing them down. All right. So now, please, everybody sit up straight and tall in your seat. Put your feet firmly on the ground and your back supported in the chair. And what I want you to do is I want you to start by thinking about that first thing you're really grateful for. And here we go. I want you to inhale deeply through your nose. Now exhale slowly through your mouth. Now think of that second thing you're grateful for. Here we go. Inhale deeply through your nose. Now exhale slowly through your mouth. Now think of that third thing you're grateful for. Let it broaden a little smile on your face. Here we go. Inhale deeply through your nose. Exhale slowly through your mouth. So that activity is called Grateful Breath, and I'm a big fan of that activity because it's really accessible for pretty much everybody. It's an easy start to how to kind of help us self-regulate our emotions and also induce a little positive emotions, because as we think about what we're grateful for, it actually helps us induce positive emotions. As we think about those things we're grateful for, our limbic system releases some oxytocin and helps kind of boost our mood a little bit. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about this strategy and the usefulness it could have in this time. So we're living through very dysregulating times. And what really makes us flip our lid is often not a single stressor that's really a big stressor, but rather the small buildup of little stressors over the course of our day that eventually has that straw that broke the camel's back phenomenon. And if you can build a periodic grateful breath into your day, then you can kind of keep that straw that broke the camel's back phenomenon from happening by settling your emotions periodically. I'm going to invite you to do something a little different. Grab a pen. Give me 1 second, Amy. Grab a pen, and what I want you to do is I want you to make a mark on your wrist, about where your wristwatch would be, like right here. Make a little mark on your wrist. And what I want you to do is every time you see that dot, I want you to pause, think of something you're grateful for, and then take a grateful breath. And it could be really helpful. I'm sorry, Amy, what were you going to say?
I was just thinking, wouldn't that be a great thing to do if every morning, to walk in and do that with your students? I mean, that would be like a 1 minute, maybe a minute and a half, and you could walk in every morning and just do that with your students. I think it would be great.
Well, thanks. I'm a big fan of building some kind of mindful moment, breathing strategy practice in, and I love that one. I think it's a good one to start. I also like having variety too. But anyway, thank you guys for joining me in that. One of the reasons that I did that, and one of the reasons that I think it's important that we focus on that first, is that it's so important as adults that we put our oxygen mask on first. I know this metaphor is well played, but when you get on a plane, they tell you put your oxygen mask on before you put the oxygen mask on for the little people traveling with you. And right now we have little people, lots of little people traveling with us through very turbulent skies. And it's super important that we put our oxygen mask on first, because a dysregulated adult cannot teach emotional intelligence to a child. Go one step further, it's hard for a dysregulated adult to teach anything to a child. There's no question we're experiencing an enormous worldwide storm. There's no doubt that's happening. And the reality is that there's not that much we really can do to change the storm. But what we can do is we can find our calm and share calm and promote calm so that we can all weather the storm better together. You can't really calm the storm, so stop trying. But what you can do is calm yourself and share that calm, and the storm will eventually pass. Maya Angelou said that every storm eventually runs out of rain, and this one's been raining a long time, but I feel like we're starting to see some glimmers of hope, and this one will eventually pass as well. And the better we are at managing our emotions, not eliminating our emotions, but managing them and keeping them at helpful levels, the more likely we are to weather that storm. All right, so I want you guys to play along. So here's what I need you to do, please. We're going to do a little interactive activity. So I want you to grab your phone and your cameras. A lot of you have cameras that have QR readers on them. So if you'll take your camera and point it at this QR reader, it'll take you to a link where you can do an interactive activity with me. If you're not, super QR savvy and this isn't your thing, don't worry. I'm going to show you another way to get there here in a moment. And it's in the chat. You can find it there in the chat. But I'm going to change my share. So give me a second to change my share. And we're going to share this fun thing that we're going to be doing together. Okay. So you guys should now see this. And if you would please enter your answer, what are 3 things that you think are big emotions that students and staff might be feeling now? And I'll pop them up. And what you're going to see is as you guys are entering data, it's going to reorder to put the most common answers that you guys are sharing in the middle and in the biggest text. So this is what our participants are saying. I'll let it kind of reorganize for a couple of minutes while you guys do that. But hopefully you can join. If you weren't able to join with the link or the QR code, you can use that little www.menti.com and then use that code 57827065 and you can join and interact with us. Oh, this is awesome. Look at that, Amy. We got like 40 people that have already responded. I love it.
I know, it's like you could see overwhelmed, anxious, stress. It's a lot, isn't it? I mean, I think, and I think one of the things about coming together in these kinds of ways too, is it makes you realize that it actually is quite normal to be feeling all of these things right now, and I think we're all so hard on ourselves that we should feel like if we just did enough wellness stuff that we could, coach ourselves into, feeling really hopeful and positive. And, some days it's easier to do that than others, because no matter what, these are hard times. So
no doubt. No doubt. It's very validating to have other people expressing kind of what we're feeling as well, and to know that we're not always supposed to be happy and completely regulated, that, emotions are a part of life, and, that we're not supposed to be suppressing or eliminating our emotions and masking them into some toxic positivity, but instead we should understand what our emotions are, what the messages are, and keep those emotions at helpful and not hijacked levels.
Yeah, self-compassion is an important thing to be exercising right now, self-compassion.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, thank you guys for sharing this. It looks like the most common expression of emotion is overwhelmed. There's a lot of people talking about anxiety and, exhaustion, frustration, and, confusion. There's definitely these big emotions. And one of the things that I think is important about looking at this is a cloud of emotions. Imagine how hard it is to really fully engage with school and with our normal routines when we feel this giant cloud of emotions, especially if they're at hijacked levels. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to come back to the PowerPoint. All right, and so thank you guys for playing along with me. So what I want to do now is I want to share with you a student video. So this student, Liv McNeil, created a video about her experience during the pandemic. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share this video with you. And if it doesn't play right for you, don't worry, the link is there and you can watch it later if it doesn't play perfectly for you. But here it goes. Check it out. That video always hits me in a big way, and for multiple reasons. So first off, I think the first big takeaway I get from that video is that that's a student in a functional environment. Imagine a student that's in a dysfunctional environment, one that might be, not in that same safe space.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Even just the fact that she even has her own bedroom is actually like, that she can at least have some quiet space to actually be, doing her online school is a lot more than a lot of kids have.
So that's a student in a functional space. And obviously you can see even students in functional spaces have experienced a significant amount of trauma, trauma from, the grief of the loss of normal experiences, or loneliness from disconnection from their peers, or, the anxiety of going from, thriving to surviving, in a time, the change of having to become a different kind of learner and interact with teachers who have to be a different kind of teacher, that they weren't hired to be webinar teachers and suddenly, this is the way they have to teach. So there's so many pieces there that are dysregulating. And then you add to that the overarching traumas of our times, from the social injustice to the rise in hate crimes and the increase of division. We have a lot of dysregulating things happening in our world, and we have to realize that everybody is coming back with some experienced trauma in their lives, and that we don't know which version of the storm everybody's been in. Some people have been in a mild sprinkle, and some people have been in a terrifying tornado. But it's so important that we extend radical grace and patience for ourselves, for our colleagues, for our students, and our families. That needs to be our theme as we go into this next year, is radical grace and patience. And then my last thing that I think is really important that I think is a big takeaway from that video is this. Kids desperately need you. They need calm, connected, caring adults in their lives. And those of you in the room that are mental health advocates and you're here because you're a mental health advocate, oh my gosh, do they need you? They need you to plan and prepare and advocate so that there are systems in place for kids coming back who have experienced significant traumas. So I'll go back to my share. So there's lots of data about the change in mental health, and there's tons of stuff out there, and I'll hit more of this later, but there's no question that no matter whether you're an adult or a student, you've experienced some significant challenges around mental health. So what can we do about this, and how does this tie into social emotional learning? So I want to teach social emotional learning competencies a little different way. It's kind of the way that I like to teach it. I want you to consider drawing this down. I know a lot of you already know this, but I want to present it a little differently. So on the vertical axis, you've got thoughts to actions, and on the horizontal axis, you've got self to others. I'm going to walk you through these competencies on this scale. So if you think about your thoughts about yourself, that's your self-awareness. This is your ability to know what's going on with you and know your strengths and weaknesses. And this is really important around mental health because if I know what I'm feeling and I know what I need, I'm much more likely to self-advocate and know that I need help. So self-awareness is a really key skill in this time. Your social awareness is kind of like your emotional radar, your ability to recognize what other people might be thinking and feeling. And we're always navigating a world of people, so it's helpful. But right now around mental health, this is really helpful because if I'm got a better emotional radar, I might recognize someone who is in need a little sooner and might be able to give them some support or might be able to refer them to some support. So, making sure everyone feels seen, that's a really big deal right now is everybody wants to feel seen, and your social awareness is your radar to recognize what's going on with other people. Your actions of yourself is your self-management. Your self-management is your ability to manage your behaviors and manage your emotions. And talk about an important skill right now, being able to manage my emotions and keep them at helpful and not hijacked levels is really important right now because this is a very dysregulating time. And being able to self-regulate even in a dysregulating time is a very powerful and important social emotional learning and emotional intelligence skill. Your actions of others is your relationship skills. And these are your abilities to select, build, and maintain healthy relationships. And when you talk about this in the framework of mental health, our relationships have a huge impact on our feelings and our mental health and our social support network. So these skills of being able to actively listen and resolve conflicts and apologize and forgive can protect and build relationships that can be a better support network for us in those challenging times. And then last but not least is our ability to make responsible decisions. And responsible decision making means, being able to make good decisions based on your values and your goals. And I want to make sure I hit this really hard. It needs to be person-centered. What I mean by that is that SEL is about empowering individuals, students, and adults with skills to transform their lives. SEL is not about controlling individuals and laying those values, somebody else's values on them, rather teaching skills that they can use in alignment with their values and their goals to accomplish what they want in their lives. I think that's a key delineation. So one of the big things I want to highlight around right now, and this kind of pulls down and dives more into self-management, this is the neurosequential model of functional IQ. This is from the brilliant work of Dr. Bruce Perry. And what you're looking at is a chart around functional IQ. So at the top row, that is your functional IQ decreasing as you become more and more emotional. One of the things about our brain is as we become more and more emotional, our brain moves more and more into our survival brain. So if you think about this like a model of your brain, as we become more and more emotional, our thinking moves more and more into our survival brain. And as we're calmer, our thinking often moves more and more into our thinking brain. And so what you're looking at on this chart is the functional IQ decreasing, which part of the brain is firing the most in that emotional state, what are the capabilities of that part of the brain, and then what's the mental state. So if I think about green light is kind of like I'm in a good place, I feel pretty good, I can access my thinking brain, that's pretty good. As I become a little bit more emotional and I move into my yellow light situation, my limbic system, I can't access as much of my thinking brain. And you can see my functional IQ is going down. When I get even more emotional, I get more emotionally hijacked. Now my thinking moves into my diencephalon and my brainstem, my survival brain. And this is why we do such stupid things when we are emotionally hijacked, and why it's so important for us to understand these states and learn enough awareness so that we might be able to manage those states, not to eliminate emotions, but to keep emotions at helpful and not hijacked levels. So the blue is the contemplative state. And what I love about talking about the blue is a lot of times when people tell you, when you've got a big decision, they'll say, well, sleep on it, or, meditate about it or whatever. And what they're really telling you is to get to the contemplative state. This part when you're really calm and you can access your more advanced inner wisdom, your deeper thinking processes. I love this chart, and I think if you look at this chart and think of it like it's got invisible ink on it, and right now you erase the chart, it would say calm equals smart. Calm equals smart. So if I could help everybody think about how can I find my calm, share my calm, and promote calm in classrooms, that's really powerful. Your emotional state is a huge part of your classroom. It's teaching way more than you realize. And you are so influential. Your emotional state is the most contagious in the classroom. And so it's super important that you set the classroom emotional thermostat to calm, positive, and connected. And sometimes it's hard to do, but you got to find ways to do it, because by doing it, you're going to help the whole classroom be more calm, positive, and connected.
Yeah, this is interesting too, and I think it's so fascinating. But it also kind of reminds me of kind of the, just the research I've read around mirror neurons, and how contagious emotions are, and it really just does speak to the fact that, we start with ourselves, and SEL for adults is super important, because if we can get ourselves into the green or blue, that's going to really help kids.
Well, not only that, but your behavior teaches more than your words. And so, my behavior is my greatest asset and my greatest adversary when I'm teaching kids. If I'm able to really show that I can manage my emotions, that's a wonderful teaching moment for kids. And when I am teaching you about managing emotions, but then I lose it, that's a huge adversary for my ability to teach this.
Except I do think there's times, when we lose it, it's such a great opportunity for us to then walk through our process of not that, in the sense of I think with teachers, I've seen this happen often, where teachers will use their own problem solving and their own emotion management, and then talk the kids through, gosh, I'm feeling frustrated. Here's how I feel when I'm frustrated, and what I need to do is X, Y, and Z. And those can also be teachable moments as well.
I'm really glad you said that, because I clearly misstated that. That's so important. The teachable moments when I'm starting to lose control, but then I adjust and manage that emotion, that is a beautiful modeling in the class. And if I do lose it, taking the time to apologize sincerely to the class is another huge modeling opportunity and teachable moment. What could I have done differently in that moment? Hey, you could have taken some belly breaths before you lost it, or you could have gone for a walk. Those things become really powerful lessons in your room. I'm so glad you said that, Amy. Thank you. The goal of this work is not to silence our emotions, but rather to be friends with our emotions, to build relationships with our emotions, to understand that every emotion has a message, and that those messages are important, but we want to keep those emotions at helpful and not, hijacked levels. And that's kind of the punchline of the movie Inside Out, is that all emotions have a role and are important, and that we don't just feel one emotion, that we feel a mixture of emotions, and that the belief that we should only feel joy all the time is not really helpful. We need to be able to experience a full range of emotions, but we want to be able to keep those emotions at helpful and not at hijacked levels. Okay, so the core of what we're talking about today is how does SEL and mental health combine, and especially around an MTSS framework. How can we support students? So this is the big bulk of what we're talking about today. And so I want to talk to you about a really important metaphor around this work and that I've been using for many years. This metaphor is called the lake, the river, and the waterfall. So I want you to imagine a beautiful scenic lake. It's a gorgeous scenic lake that feeds into a raging river with tons of rapids and eventually feeds into a gigantic and tragic waterfall. And you're relaxing on a summer day and you're listening to the gurgle of the rapids and enjoying the summer day when all of a sudden you see a child in the rapids. And you're like, oh my gosh, there's a child in the rapids headed towards a waterfall. And you don't even take off your clothes. You just dive into the water and you swim out, swim out, swim out, swim out. And you grab that kid. You fight the current, fight the current, fight the current. You get that kid back to the beach. You're huffing and puffing. You could barely get him back. They're huffing and puffing. And as you're doing this, you look up the river to the lake and you see at the lake there are thousands of kids playing in the lake. And some of them are getting into the mouth of the river. And you're like, no, 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 somebody has got to go up there to that lake and teach those kids to stay out of the river. But you can't do it because if you leave your spot, the kids in the river are going over the waterfall. This metaphor is MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. The lake is proactive education. It's teaching kids skills like how to be more aware of their emotions and manage their emotions, and how to advocate for themselves and access resources, how to resolve conflicts, how to build healthy relationships, maybe even a little bit of how to induce positive emotions. Those kinds of skills are really important skills, and teaching those skills ahead of challenges is critical work. The river is a kid that's struggling with a challenge, generally because nobody's taught them that skill. So imagine the kid who doesn't know how to diffuse their anger and doesn't know how to do conflict resolution. Well, if I don't know how to diffuse anger and I don't know conflict resolution, then when I have a conflict, there's a good chance it's going to escalate to some kind of fight. And that's an example of a child struggling with a challenge because nobody has really taught them that skill. And the challenging thing about our world, as you know, is that the world has a tendency to throw us the same curveball until we can hit it. Until we can finally figure out how to actually handle this challenge, we seem to butt up against it all the time. And one of the biggest problems that I see is that we don't really give much help until crisis. Because a kid who is struggling with that challenge, that, I can't diffuse anger, I can't do conflict resolution, eventually the conflict escalates to a crisis level conflict. And this is a huge problem in education and in our world, is that we really only give help we almost only give help at the waterfall. And once kids are at the waterfall, there's already all kinds of challenges that have already happened, that all kinds of issues. This is such a bad model. It is a reactive crisis model. We need to become a proactive skill model. We need to focus our work on the lake. And if we do a better job at the lake, there will be fewer kids in the river and there will be fewer kids in the waterfall. I'm not saying there won't be any kids in the river. We're still going to have kids that are struggling, but we're going to have less. And it's so critical that we understand the relationship between these three. Okay. So the message behind this that I hope everybody gets is we have to become a wellness model instead of a sickness model, a proactive model instead of a crisis model. We've got to do a great job of teaching skills to students before these skills and these challenges escalate to crisis. And I'm going to tell you a beautiful story. So this is a picture of me with one of my former students, Monica Rios, and she's amazing. Monica has overcome a lot of challenges, and she had many challenges in high school and beyond high school. And she has on record many times said how much her SEL experience helped her, equip her with some skills to overcome these challenges. But the reason I wanted to share her story in particular is Monica has done some amazing advocacy. She was a legislative aide in the state of Texas. And when her legislator said, hey, do you have anything that you really believe in that you want to talk to me about, maybe possibly creating a bill? She convinced her legislator, Eddie Rodriguez, that there needed to be a bill that made it where every student in the state of Texas learned some emotional management skills and conflict resolution skills and relationship skills. That was House Bill 4454. There's a whole article about it that you can see in that link. And that bill eventually got absorbed into another bill, and literally that is now a law that in the state of Texas that has to happen. And that's amazing, and advocacy from a student who believes something really helped her and she wanted all kids to have it. We have to make this model change. We've got to figure out how can we move to that proactive model. And that's the whole work of SEL. SEL is that lake work. If you think about your campus is that lake, right? And everybody in the lake needs to learn some skills on emotional management, conflict resolution, relationship skills. And we need that research and evidence-based kind of proactive support, because doing that is going to reduce the kids that are struggling in the river and reduce the kids that are at the waterfall that we're spending a lot of time trying to work with crisis. For a second, think about this. We have nowhere near enough mental health resources in schools and counselors. We all know this. The recommendation is 250 students per counselor, and most schools are 2, 3, 4 times that many students per counselor in the ratio. And yes, we need more mental health workers for sure. But what we need to do is take this concept of mental health and supporting mental health as part of everybody's job. That all teachers need to be supporting these skills and growing these skills and recognizing kids that might have challenges and referring them to resources. So this model, I'm sure many of you are familiar with. This is the RTI or MTSS, same kind of model. And I want to talk about this around mental health. Too often this is talked about around attendance or reading, and those, I'm not saying those aren't important things, but really right now, we need to have a huge focus on mental health. And so that tier 1, the bottom of your triangle, that's that lake work. That's that universal skill building, right? And then your tier 2 is the river, right? A student that might be struggling with a challenge that we're going to give an additional support to. And notice I said the word additional. So a lot of times we get the misunderstanding that we think that when a kid moves from tier 1 to tier 2, they're no longer getting tier 1. But no, we want them to get additional supports at tier 2 and then additional supports at tier 3. That's why you see the +1 and +2. But what we want is strong communication, effective collaboration, and a coherent narrative through this system. The goal of tier 1, this is the teacher level primarily, is skill development, right? That we want our teachers building skills and using research and evidence based methods to build these skills like emotional management and conflict resolution and relationship building and self-advocacy and accessing resources. That's the skill development. But we also want a relationship in that room where I might have a better chance of recognizing red flags so that I can then refer. And we need those teachers to get some training in like mental health first aid so they can be better at recognizing those red flags and making sure that they're building the common language on the campus around these skills. They're holding that common language. It's not being built by the top. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But the whole goal of tier 1 is really skills and a superhighway. How can I build safe spaces, skills, and a superhighway from needy kids to quality services as fast as possible? Because when a student is struggling with an unmet need, it's affecting their achievement, it's affecting their behavior, it's affecting their emotions, it's affecting all kinds of things in their lives. So the sooner we can have a relationship and recognize red flags and get that needy kid to a quality service, the more likely that kid is to thrive. Now, tier 3 are mental health experts, our counselors, our school psychologists, our social workers, whoever that is on your campus. Their first goal obviously has to be triage and therapeutic care. Now, I understand that, our mental health counselors on campuses aren't necessarily therapists, and I get that we're going to be moving them to more therapeutic care if needed, but you're the only ones on campus that really have the true background and understanding to be able to do that triage and possibly some therapeutic care. And so that's got to be the first priority. You're the waterfall workers first. Then your next big priority is, how can I grow the lake work? How can I build capacity in my teachers to feel good about doing that lake work? Oftentimes I'll see schools that focus around a push-in model of tier 1, where the teacher grades papers while the counselor comes in and teaches a lesson. That's not a great model, because what we want to build capacity in the teacher. So yes, if the counselor comes in and does a push-in lesson, that's great. But one of the most important people hearing that lesson needs to be that teacher. So we're building capacity, because even if the counselor's full-time job was just pushing instruction, they can't do enough tier 1 work to build the kind of foundation of skills. We need every teacher teaching these skills. Their job also needs to be to help support and grow the ability to recognize red flags and do referrals and build systems to get those needy kids quality services faster. And the last piece that I think is, no, two more pieces. One, we got to speak the speak at tier 3. And what I mean by that is that tier 3 has to reinforce the language of tier 1. So whatever you're teaching in your universal skill building on, the technique to manage emotions or resolve a conflict, our counselors should then reinforce that same lesson and then add on to it. But it's super important that you build back into that lesson. Say, hey, did you try this technique? Did you try that? Because it's empowering that tier 1 and saying this is important stuff. I'll add some more to it. But the first expert on your campus of your tier 1 resource really needs to be, your counselors need to know it so they can say it at those reteachable, really beautiful moments. And then last but not least is, you got to inform tier 1. Meaning there's going to be trends on your campus. So like maybe this next year, you might see a trend with more anxiety than usual. And if you are seeing a trend at tier 3, then you need to have a conversation with tier 1 and say, hey, listen, we're seeing a lot of anxiety. Maybe we need to do a longer unit on managing stress or advocating for ourselves or accessing resources or, coping with anxiety. And that informing tier 1 is really important. So the job of tier 3 is support, coherent narrative, and training. And this is what we're trying to build. And it's not going to be a light switch. You're not going to just say, this is what we're building, click. You're going to have to build it over time. But this, I think, is really what we need to be aiming for in schools. Amy, does anything jump out to you from this model that you wanted to share or comment about?
No, I'm just very inspired, Keith. It's I love your energy.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Well, I will tell this quick story. So when I first started teaching SEL, I have this safe space and I have, relationships, and I became a safe adult, and kids would reveal red flags in their lives. And when I first started teaching this work, the system that we had in place at my school was, I needed to, when a kid revealed a red flag, is I would look up that kid's alpha counselor. Oh, your last name is Hernandez? So this counselor has from A to L. Okay, that's the person. And I'd send them an email. And that email could sit in that email box for 3 days or 4 days or a week before that kid got support. Sometimes it was faster, but there was no system of saying, this is really important. We got to have somebody follow up. And so it really was a problem, especially for me, because I was this safe space and lots of kids were, sharing when there was a challenge. And so I got really involved in advocating in my district. I got involved in something called the Shack, which is this community health organization that advises the district. And we started a system of how do we build a better system to get needy kids to quality services. And we built a system where there is, at first it was called a crisis counselor on campus. So the crisis counselor was an individual that was identified that if there is a red flag in your class, you immediately immediately send an email to the crisis counselor, and they are going to be monitoring that all the time. And they will then do triage and recognize what is the appropriate time frame to get this kid services and what are the appropriate services. And that really filled in that gap of that needy kids a quality service faster. Now, what's interesting is, and really ties into this model, is they changed the name after a short period of time from crisis counselor to wellness counselor based on this exact message, because what we're really doing is we're trying to, help a student at an opportune time and think more about promoting wellness. So anyway, I love the model of trying to figure out how do we really build that, bat signal system to get that kid that student more support faster. All right. So this ties into a strategy I've been speaking about since February of last year, and now this is like my whole thing, is the anchor point adult. So the concept of the anchor point adult is, since school buildings closed in March, 30% of young people have reported feeling more unhappy or depressed. 29% have felt they do not feel connected to a school adult at all. 7 out of 10 teens have reported having more mental health struggles, and 81% of teenagers say mental health is a significant issue for young people in the US, their friends. My daughter is a teenager, and she talks about, this is definitely one of the big topics that everybody is talking about. So this is a stormy sea, if you want to think about this metaphor. This is a very stormy sea. It's really easy for a student in this kind of a stormy sea to get lost or drift off. And creating a strong connection, an anchor to a calm, caring adult is so important. And how do we do this? So the anchor point strategy is all around this quote from Dr. Perry, which is, the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely they are to recover from trauma and thrive. One of my friends, Jim Sportleader, he talks about the power of one. He was the principal in the movie Paper Tigers, and how one caring adult can make all the difference for a child. And the goal of the anchor point system is to ensure that every child has this kind of anchor adult. And in elementary school, this is not as big of a challenge because the elementary school teacher has 20 to 25 kids, and those are their anchor kids. Those are the kids you should be, in theory, adopting. But as you get to the level where you start changing classes and changing teachers for subjects, this can get really problematic with diffusion of responsibility. Who is the anchor point adult for each kid? And as a secondary teacher, yes, I want to build a relationship with all of my kids, no doubt. But if I have 180 kids, it's very challenging to build that kind of relationship where I know each kid by name, by face, by interest, by background, by need. Knowing that is really hard for 180 kids. So the concept behind the anchor point adult system is that as an administration team, as a campus team, you are very strategic in identifying small groups of students that are assigned to each adult. And obviously the smaller the better, because if we can get smaller, we can get deeper in those connections. But some schools have a hard time making that happen. I understand. Great model would be advisory, and an advisory model where you keep the same kids for multiple years, that would make it much more likely you'd build that relationship. But not every school can make that work. So one of the easy ways to do this is just say, whoever's in your first period, that's your anchor period. Every kid in your first period, we want you to build a strong relationship with so that you can recognize their needs. And we're going to count on you for that, because when there is a meeting to support that student, we're going to invite the anchor point adult to that meeting, whether it's a 504 or an ART or, a student impact meeting, whatever it is. I'm going to invite you, that anchor point adult, and we're going to tell other teachers, contact the anchor point adult if you're struggling with a student. Maybe they have a strategy for you, because in theory, they should know that kid the best. And their goal is to build a relationship so you can ask the deep question, hey, what do you need? Kids aren't going to reveal their needs if they don't have a relationship with you, if they don't feel connected to you, where you think they matter, you're important to them. And so once you say, hey, what do you need? And you have that kind of relationship, they might reveal one of 4 really big needs. They might tell you about a physical health need, like, hey, obviously that's a clear issue right now. They might tell you about food insecurity, or, they could be lots of kids who have never had financial issues, and families who've never had food insecurity are suddenly finding that. I mean, that is crazy change in our environment. They might tell you about a technology issue that's struggling to make them be able to access resources, or they might tell you about a mental health need. And your job is not necessarily to solve these problems, but to recognize them as quickly as possible and get the needy student to the quality service faster. And then as a mental health system, you want to build systems that can support these kids. And I'm just going to tell you right now, these needs are coming back with kids in the fall. To not build systems now, knowing that's coming back, would be very short-sighted. We know it's coming with the kids and adults in the fall. This is important. So Dr. James Conner said that no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. And that's really important around this anchor point strategy. We've really got to build that kind of relationship. And one of the things I want to be able to do with that relationship is to do meaningful check-ins regularly, on a regular basis, because our states change. Like, we don't always feel the same state week to week or even day to day. If I break up with my girlfriend, I change my state pretty quickly. So it's important that we're doing some regular check-ins with students. So there's a different pyramid of check-ins that I like to teach staffs. And so the bottom is these broad check-ins, like a mood meter or a Padlet or a Flipgrid or a Mind or a Google form or a SurveyMonkey that I can send out to a large group and say, hey, how are you feeling? And I can do it lots of different ways, but let's imagine I'm doing it on a scale of 1 to 10. So 10 being I'm feeling good, feeling generally good, 1 meaning I'm feeling terrible. I know that's not the best example, but it will work for what I'm talking about. And so the kids that might rate themselves a 1, 2, 3, or 4, that's a great way for me to see that and then follow up and go, okay, I need to do a one-on-one with that kid. So that's a cool little, emotional screener, so to speak. But much more meaningful is those classroom conversations that build communities of support. That's that group chats where we do an activity where we talk and kids have this space to share, this is what I'm feeling, right? And they could be feeling happy because they hit a home run or because their dog had puppies, or they could be feeling, grief because their grandmother passed away from COVID. But having a space that's safe and designated for kids to share what they're going through and to get support and validation from their peers is crazy powerful. And it doesn't have to be done by a counselor. Teachers can facilitate this kind of a space. It is not therapy, but it's highly therapeutic to give kids a space where they can talk about this for a minute. It doesn't have to be long. Check-in can be done in 20 or 30 minutes, or sometimes when kids are first starting this practice, it can be done in like 6 or 7 minutes. But just giving kids space to name what they're feeling, I'm trying to use the phrase, we've got to state it to self-regulate it. But if I can get to a place where I can state what I'm feeling, just stating what I'm feeling gives me some power over it. And then last but not least is that higher level, which is those one-on-one chats. And kids that rank themselves lowly on those scales or on the mood meters, then I want to follow up with that one-on-one chat and find out, hey, what's going on? And see, do I need to refer this kid to someone else? But thinking about these kinds of check-ins and regularly doing these different levels is a key part of this work. Okay, so how this could look over the course of a week with the anchor point strategy. So a week at a glance. You would want your check-in to happen on Mondays, and you would want the first adult in an ideal world, this is an ideal world, you'd want the first adult that kid sees to be that anchor point adult. Think about it this way. The anchor point adult is going to be more likely you get out of bed to go to that, see that, I want to see Amy, right? So good to see Amy, right? Because that's my anchor point person. I care about that person. They care about me. I've got a relationship. It's going to make me more likely to start off my week at a better place. So I want that anchor point space to be first, if possible. It may not be possible, but that's ideal, right? And we want to convince those teachers to really work to adopt your kids. And I'm going to tell you something that sounds like a big phrase, and I get it, and it's a metaphor. Obviously, we're not actually adopting our kids, but I just want to say, as a classroom teacher, that's the good stuff. I mean it. That is the good stuff. Being able to really connect with kids and have a relationship that, you know, you might be invited to a college graduation or you might hear the good news. That's what makes teaching really wonderful, in my opinion. And so having that space, and even if we can create spaces where we keep those same kids for multiple years, that is super powerful. And then after that Monday check-in, then what I would do is I would introduce an SEL theme of that week, you know, a lesson that we might be working on or a concept that we might be talking about. And then somewhere Tuesday, Wednesday, we would do an asynchronous or a synchronous lesson. So maybe I could have them do it as homework, or maybe I do it in class. And this doesn't have to be a long thing because I'm spreading it out over the week. But I want to do some kind of proactive skill building with that lesson. And then in an ideal world, I want to have some kind of office hours or a space, even if it's an open door at lunch policy, where a kid could have something come up and they could come in and pop their head and say, hey, Mr. Matheny, or that my students call me Coach Rudy. Coach Rudy, hey, I was reading that lesson about, you know, disagreeing respectfully, and I'm really struggling with that with my sibling. It could be something small like that, or it could be bigger, but having that safe moment that kid could find you, I think is really important. And then the end of the week, doing a collective meaning-making activity where we discuss, what'd you think about the SEL lesson this week? What'd you like about it? What did you dislike about it? What would you argue with? How can you apply it? Where kids can learn from other kids applying that. I really recommend when you do this work, you need research and evidence-based, high quality, explicit instruction, because you don't have time for all the draw on the dirt stuff, because if it doesn't work, you've almost inoculated your campus against SEL. Oh, we tried that mad to be sad thing and it didn't work. It's important that you get high quality research and evidence-based materials when you do this. So this is a video on how to host a check-in. You can find this little QR code, and there's a video of me teaching teachers how to host a check-in that you could share with your campus or you could use. But this has been a really powerful practice in my classroom. And I saw in the chat that a couple of teachers that I support are here, and they've said that it has helped them as well. So I appreciate that. All right. So I'm getting towards our close, and as I'm kind of closing up, we have a couple more slides and a couple more important pieces, but I love this little image. So we've got this guy who's got this heavy load, and they've got all this stuff, and they're like, SEL, we don't have time to teach SEL. We got to get ready for the test, right? And they don't realize that they've got these square wheels, and that SEL is a time maker. It's not a time taker. Every minute you spend teaching kids to manage emotions is 11 minutes you don't spend managing their emotions. Every minute you spend teaching kids to resolve conflicts is 11 minutes you don't spend resolving conflicts or all that. And this is supported by an article that was published in EdWeek, and it's a study from Columbia University that the economic impact of explicit research and evidence-based SEL instruction is 11-1. And it was written by a friend of mine, Tim Shriver. So this is a follow-up meta-analysis of the impact of explicit SEL instruction over years. So 3 years after the last lesson is basically this study. And they studied 97,000 students. And you can find this study, the resources are at the end, so if you want to look at this study. But basically what they found is that students who had explicit instruction and research and evidence-based program, they scored higher academically. You know, even 3.5 years later, they were scoring higher academically. And that at follow-up periods, that conduct problems, emotional distress, drug use were all significantly lower. But this is my favorite one, is that second to bottom one. Explicit instruction SEL participants were less likely, significantly less likely to ever have a mental health issue, a significant clinical mental health issue. They were significantly less likely to ever become involved in the juvenile justice system. And they were significantly less likely to have rates of sexually transmitted infections or teenage pregnancies. So these skills translate into real life outcomes later on, way after the lessons were taught. And the results were similar regardless of students' race, socioeconomic background, or school location based on this study. One of the principals that I've worked with for many years, her name is Denise Hausauer, and I love her very much. She's a wonderful, wonderful principal, wonderful human being. And she says that SEL is not a Band-Aid approach. It's a game changer. And the QR code in the top right corner is a case study that was published in, I think it was EdWeek, an Ed Week case study about the SEL program at Damani Ranch. So I hope you'll check that out. And then the picture here is with one of my superstar former students who I am super proud of. His name is Daniel McCutcheon, and he was, and coming in freshman year, he was labeled an at-risk. I like to think of him at promise, but he was labeled an at-risk freshman, and he ended up graduating valedictorian of our high school and ended up going on to do a TED Talk that now has, I don't know, 40,000 views about how SEL impacted his life. And the TED Talk is called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And he talks about using, it's super awesome. Anyway, I hope you'll check that out too. So I have a closing video and a closing quote. So here's the closing video. I got a chance to speak to Congress. It was sponsored by Committee for Children years ago in 2014. You're not going to listen to me speak. You're going to hear Tim Shriver speak. And I have permission from Tim to share this with you all. But I'll let you hear what he had to say about this work.
I had the honor of being in Keith's class about 4 or 5 weeks ago in Austin, and it was a class of freshmen, which he'll talk a little bit more about, but the lesson of the day was on apologies and the ways in which people heal relationships. And I thought to myself, this is a fairly basic set of lessons. Well, I spent the whole day with 14-year-olds practicing, role-playing, critiquing, and exploring the idea of apology. I got home later that night and I had an apology to make to my wife. And let me just tell you, this stuff really works. Because if you can get away with apologizing more effectively after 27 years of marriage and your wife smiles, I'm telling you, that's the best recommendation I have for social and emotional learning. Take Keith's statistics for a second. You heard him with great smarts and emotion describe some of the changes. But we did a little fun math. So if you took those statistics and extrapolated them, if you implemented high-quality social and emotional learning programs in high schools for freshmen in the way that that's been done at Austin High School across the United States in 27,000 high schools, you'd have 24 million additional passing grades, 24 million additional passing grades. You'd have 8.6 million fewer discipline referrals. 8.6 million fewer discipline referrals in American high schools if they all had evidence-based, high-quality, well-implemented, expertly taught social and emotional learning programs. 12 million more hours time on task for teachers. Just extrapolating from the data of one school, and we can only guess with suicide and severe depression. You can never know for sure, but if you lost 3 lives because of the pain of severe depression, and we could save that number of lives and extrapolate that across the United States, you can just imagine the numbers of 13 and 14 and 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds who are not facing the most horrific of conditions, which is the sense in which their life is not worth living.
That's a really powerful end quote. I just want to say this is a big part of my why for this work. We have desperately got to be more proactive in teaching kids mental health skills. We're seeing too much of a rise in mental health issues and suicide ideation, and we have got to get ahead of it. We've got to be more proactive. We can't wait until they're at the waterfalls. We've got to do a better job. We can't pull all the weeds in our society. The best way, in my opinion, to build a better world is to better equip the next generation. And the front lines of that work is in our classrooms and it's in our kitchen tables. I want to say I'm a big fan of curriculum. I'm a big fan of Second Step and School Connect, but I just want to tell you, curriculum doesn't teach. Teachers teach. And teachers teach through meaningful, authentic relationships and powerful, relevant experiences. You make the difference. And I beg you, please, please, you were here for a reason. Go advocate for this stuff. If I can help you, please reach out. I'm constantly leading workshops and webinars. I'd be happy to help you. Please reach out. And I want to thank you for being here and wish you good luck. I hope you are grateful for whatever you can be in your past. You're mindful for your present, and you are hopeful for your future.
Thank you so much, Keith. And we're going to be sending all of you a recording of this webinar, and we hope you share it with all of your co-teachers and your principals in your district. It's really such an inspiring message, Keith. It's an important time. There's going to be a lot of mental health issues on the rise because of the situation we're in, and you're all in such powerful positions to use SEL and all the work that you're doing to really be the change that we're wanting to see for our kids. So thank you for joining us. We're really happy to have you, and we're very thankful to Keith for his really amazing presentation. And please, when you get the email of this, please share the recording and spread this message. And thank you for everybody for joining us. And we hope you have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.